Hello, this is Angelo Stralopa, CEO of Positivity Coaching, and you're listening to my podcast. We have as a guest with us Liz Hall. Liz Hall is an international authority on mindfulness. I remember when that was the first book was out, the Mindful Coaching, in 8 years ago, and that was really so amazing. It was about how mindfulness can transform coaching practice, and indeed it did transform coaching practice for many of us. And then that was followed 2 years later with another great book, Coaching in Times of Crisis and Transformation, about how to help individuals and organizations to flourish. And then, of course, the last one, but not least, very recently, you published from Penguin the Coach Your Team book, which is another amazing asset in for us that are for everyone that is practicing coaching. And it's not just that. Liz have been organizing for a number of years these incredible coaching conferences with Coach Network, the Coach Network magazine, of which you are co-owner and editor, and you have great masterclasses, the Coach Network Awards, and you have also organized or co-organized twice the Mindfulness and Compassion at Work International Summit. Excellent work. And I don't want to forget to say something that's quite amazing. Your books are being translated in all the popular languages around the world. Your books are available in Spanish, Arabic, in Korean, and Chinese. That's so amazing. And of course, on top of everything, you are very active in when it comes to social issues like climate change. You and Coach Network initiated the Climate Coaching Action Day international event, which has run on the second year this year, which is amazing work. So I want to welcome you, Liz. It's very nice to have you again with us. And I'm really glad to have this talk. And let me start by asking you about what is happening with teamwork and mindfulness. And tell us a little bit of how important is mindfulness, teamwork?
So it's a real delight, Angelos, to be recording this podcast. I always love working with you, and I always love talking about mindfulness. So absolutely delighted to be here. You've asked me how important mindfulness is to teamwork, and I think that's very key in these times, actually, when we've got so many pressures on teams to do their best. And what we're seeing is the spread really from mindfulness as an individual practice out into teams and beyond. So I think it's quite an exciting time where we're at a bit of a new frontier. We've seen research into the importance of psychological safety when it comes to team performance, the work of Amy Edmondson, and the study that Google carried out, Project Aristotle, which kind of indicated that, being able to speak up in a team, to make mistakes and actually be able to talk about them and learn from them, that idea of psychological safety is absolutely key in teams doing their best. And how do we make psychological safety happen, it's through mindfulness is one of the big ways. Being able to be present, being able to be mindful, being able to be aware of ourselves and others. So I think mindfulness has a huge role to play in teamwork. It helps us be better able to attend to our own patterns, if you like, that self-awareness, so we can show up in the way that we want to and support others in the way that we want to, and maybe avoid conflict, so we can just work better together. So I think mindfulness is emerging as one of the really important contributions that can be made to improving teamwork.
With everything changing during the COVID era, we have seen tremendous changings and transformation, like digital transformation at work, with remote working, getting on and on. And a lot of habits are being changing, and there's a lot of conversation, and there's a lot of concern regarding these continuous lockdowns around the world and the damage that this can make to some people in a number of areas, like self-confidence, social skills, and so on. And we're always trying to catch up with the reality, and I think that's best. And sometimes we're trying to visualize and imagine what will happen next. So I'm wondering, how do you imagine coaching in a post-COVID era?
Firstly, I find myself really feeling excited, feeling hopeful at the idea of a post-COVID era, because sometimes I think it can all feel so relentless with all the new variants and the sort of delays in vaccination programs and so on. So I think just imagining in itself a post-COVID era is quite enticing. In terms of coaching, what I see increasingly in my work, in the work that we're doing on the pro bono initiative that I co-founded, Coaching Through COVID, which offers free coaching to healthcare workers, and those in the care home system, is that the mental health problems, if you like, or struggles are increasing, the amount of it. So it's almost like another pandemic that's on its way, as it's been described by others. So this corona coaster that we've all been on, I think, we're going to see the impact being really, really far-reaching. So I see coaching as making a huge contribution in supporting people to develop better strategies, so they can, put in better self-care, so that they can look after themselves and, just tackle things early on. I also see coaching playing a starring role in getting people back into work, if they've lost their jobs, in helping them to reconnect with their purpose in the job arena, but sort of outside of that. So there may be times when they can't get a job just now, or maybe other reasons, not just COVID, the fallout from COVID. It could be the fourth industrial revolution, the role of tech. So changing the nature of work. So I think coaching can help people in a post-COVID era to just reimagine what they want to do with their lives, and identify, what steps to take. So I think there's something about coaching helping us reconnect with hope. Yeah.
For many of us that have practiced mindfulness, meditation, we know that this has changed a lot our life, the way that we live, the way that we think, relate, work, and do the things we do every day as well. And there are many times when the things that we do they help us become something that transforms us in the sense in the choices that we make, and sometimes also in how successful we are with whatever we do. And I remember right now myself a number of years ago when some coaching students were asking me what else have I done besides coaching as a teacher. And I remember that when I started meditation practices, it was back in 14 years ago. And I reflected on that question. And what I found out was that, and I'm just saying that as an example. What I found out is that I wouldn't be able to do what I do, how I do it in coaching if I haven't been practicing mindfulness practices and meditation back then. And so I'm wondering, how has mindfulness changed your life? And have you ever thought about that?
So how has mindfulness changed my life? Again, really interesting question. And I think it's changed my life in so many ways. It's certainly, if I think about a spectrum really, where at one end I'm 100% thriving, and at the other end I'm not surviving even. I think it's helped me sort of keep nudging along the spectrum towards fully thriving. So at times when it's difficult because of the pandemic or whatever else is going on in my life, in my work, that is really nourishing. It helps me recharge. It helps me re-resource. It helps me turn toward what's difficult, so I can take the right actions, and it helps me realign with purpose, which I've talked about already. So there's something about staying grounded, staying connected, and at best, it really helps me thrive and do my very, very best work and show up in the best way I can for those in my world. So yeah, and there's something about it bringing back the joy. I think we're so busy, we're so distracted with technology and so on that we forget to just take pleasure from the little things so often. And I think the wonderful thing about mindfulness, having a mindfulness practice on a daily basis, is that it helps me stay present. So it could be just cuddling the dog, or noticing spring flowers, or just taking real pleasure in a connection in relationships, or in the coaching client work I do. So yeah, joy, really. It has definitely changed my life. Professionally, I just love the work I'm doing. Mindfulness underpins pretty much everything. So I get lots of opportunities to talk about it, to write about it, to weave it into my coaching practice. So yeah, and I'm hoping it's sort of changing the lives of others in a small way.
With all the popularity that mindfulness have gained through the years, we have seen a little bit of this, a distorted image of what mindfulness is, and sometimes you get confusion or misinterpretation of what it really is, and sometimes people may think that it's just about sitting on your feet and closing your eyes and focus on your breath and doing the mantra with your fingers and saying and that's all. That's all you had to do. And it's like for me it's like somebody is embarking on a trip with a boat to cross the Atlantic, and the moment he gets in the boat, he thinks, well, that's it. That's the whole experience of it. So you get all these kind of confusions. And it makes sense because we live in a very fast-consuming world. So fast-consuming goods, fast-consuming ideas, and, well, I could go on and on. So I was thinking, with the experience that you have, with everything that you have done and with everything that you're doing, and what's the most common thing that people asking you about mindfulness?
So yeah, and obviously I'd have a lot of conversations with all sorts of people about mindfulness, be that on the coach training programs I run, or leadership development, or conferences, or the programs I run for the general public. So I do get asked a lot of questions about, the ins and outs of mindfulness. And you've asked me, what's the most common thing that people ask me about mindfulness? So one really common thing that people ask me is, do I have to sit still on a cushion? I'm finding it really hard to stay still. And that's something that I think is really key, because we have to find our own way to become more mindful. And for some of us, we may have a preference for movement, for mindful movement. So being able to incorporate it into our movement, be that going for a mindful walk or even mindful running, or yoga, whatever it is, that might be the very best way to our entry point into mindfulness, but also a way for it to be sustainable for us. And for others, it might be very much about making formal practice part of the morning routine. And still others, it might be about making time to go off, not necessarily into a cave, but to, take part in retreats. And of course, increasingly, we're seeing retreats being offered online. So I think it's finding our own way with this. And I think what often happens once people find their entry point is they'll perhaps kind of widen their capacity to practice mindfulness in lots of different ways. So that's a really common question. I think people will have resistance in different practices. And so it's finding a way to, find what floats your boat, if you like. So what's the most common thing that executives ask me? And again, I think that's a really interesting question. So I think with the leaders that I encounter, one of the most common things that they ask is almost, one of the resistances or obstacles to them putting in place mindfulness is a lack of time, or a perception, should I say, of a lack of time. So the question for them is, I haven't got time. How do I make time? What's the point? How do I make time? So for me, it's often about explaining again the benefits. So to help them get on board. So it will be things like being more emotionally intelligent, being more, having more clarity, more focus, being better able to build teams, being better able to be creative, innovative. So there's something about highlighting the benefits again. But there's also something about what's the least they can get away with, which sounds a bit of a funny way to frame it. But I think understanding that for a leader, or for any of us, it's better to do 10 minutes daily than to just wait until we've got a chunk of time. Nothing wrong with waiting to have a chunk of time. Nothing wrong with having those longer practices. That's wonderful and really helps to embody and embed the practice. But having daily pauses of 10 minutes and upwards is really, really helpful. And there was a study carried out by Ashridge with Michael Chaskhouse and others. They put leaders through the 8-week standard mindfulness training program, or variation of it, and found that was one of the things that came through. Not only were the results of the gains sustained beyond 3 months, that actually it was really important to have a daily 10 minutes or so upwards practice. So that came through quite strongly, as well as sort of benefits of being able to see the bigger picture and be able to cope with changing, the VUCA climate, volatile climate that we're all operating in.
So with everything that is happening around the world at this turn of the turn of this decade, we are becoming more and more sensitive on social issues, and I think that's good. And it's becoming more and more important and more visible. And the need to write this down and write it in the marble. And in that sense, we have seen Code of Ethics being revised, like the ICF Code of Ethics being revised to include things like our responsibility to do the right thing versus not doing bad, to make the difference. We have seen issues like we have seen coaches becoming more and more sensitive in issues like systemic racism and equity and diversity, inclusiveness, and of course climate coaching. And I know that there's a lot there to be said, but what would you say that, how is that important to you? And I know for sure that this is very important for you, but tell me a little bit more about how can we move forward to the future with this in mind, and still be good mindful coaches.
Yeah. So yeah, you're asking me whether, what the role of coaching can be in these bigger issues. And you're absolutely right. I am active both personally and professionally around topics such as climate change. I launched in 2020 the initiative Climate Coaching Action Day, which Positivity Coaching very generously has taken part in for 2 years running now. And various other initiatives, and personally doing stuff as well. Also very involved in turning towards racism, race equity, trying to build more race equity in coaching. I think those of us who are white, it's important for us to finally step up and do our work and not expect those colleagues of colour to have all the answers. So that's some of the work that I'm doing through Coaching at Work, which is a magazine I edit, and in my own work, which is kind of gathering with other coaches and just identifying where there's white privilege, where we're being overly fragile, and how we can help ourselves and others to be with the emotions that inevitably come up around some of these issues. So I think coaching can play a really big role in all sorts of ways, actually, with this. I think there's the emotional piece is important. When it comes to climate change, when it comes to racism, those sort of issues are very challenging for all of us. They really can really trigger us, and that can mean that we get defensive, we feel shame, we feel fearful, we feel angry, there's more polarization, so we can't have authentic conversations with one another. So coaching can help us be with those emotions, especially if there's mindfulness brought in as well, and it can help us have more deep and meaningful conversations. And I think there's something around us. The coaching can be very practical, of course, and it can help us identify practical next steps that will really make a difference. So instead of feeling overwhelmed because we can't do everything, it can help us just work out what's our one next step that we can take. And it could be just something really simple. So I think that prioritizing that we know coaching can help with. I think I really do feel very hopeful about the role of coaching. And I think the other thing to say really is that these issues tend to be connected, don't they? So we can't necessarily think of, the systemic racism as just one isolated issue. the same as the pandemic is connected to climate change and so on. So I think coaching can help us all, ourselves as coaches, leaders that we work with, as all sort of take a more systemic view, see the bigger picture, see where things are connected, see where there's overlap, where the patterns are, and just really support each other. And again, just to emphasize that we will each have our own individual contributions. So there's something about not trying to take on everything and embracing diversity. Yeah. So, and I just remain very hopeful that coaching will continue to support and be embedded in all sorts of quarters. So thank you, Angelos, for this opportunity to talk about these topics. I look forward to having other dialogues and taking the chance to hear other perspectives. Thank you very much.
This is Angelos Trolopoulos, and you can listen to my podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Google.